All right, so welcome everyone to the first of 5 planned office hours to focus on Zowe V3 for Zowe extenders. We'll have a follow-on series for Zowe consumers. I'm Marcia Katch, the Zowe onboarding lead, and I'll be hosting and kicking off these sessions, but essentially all of the squad leads will be delivering the details for the various Zowe projects, Zowe components. But before we get started, just want to give you a little bit of background. This office hours series will focus on specific Zowe components to ensure that we offer all of you who are extending Zowe a deeper understanding of what's happening with V3, including new features, any breaking changes, new conformance criteria, and then where you can begin testing and where to find the technology you can test with. This series and this session is meant to be interactive, so please ask questions, put them in the chat, raise any concerns, and offer any comments on the featured component. This week's component that we'll be focusing on is the Zowe API mediation layer. Jakob will be delivering the details, and certainly we want to keep it focused on the mediation layer, but once all of those questions are concluded, if you have any questions in general, please feel free to ask them. And as we did with Zowe V2, we do have a page at zowe.org that is dedicated to all things related to V3. It is the vNext tab at zowe.org. We will continue to update that page with current relevant information. We'll post the recordings there, and we'll keep you informed on the planned GA date. So with that, I will turn it over to Jakob to tell us all about the API mediation layer in V3.
Hey, thank you, Rose. Welcome, everyone, to a session focused on the API mediation layer. As for the new features that we expect to have with 3.0 version of the Zowe API mediation layer is the API rate limiting. It's important for the services that want to make sure that they are not overloading this EOS service. So the API mediation layer can state how many people can access the services actually running on the system at one point, and the other requests are waiting in line. It's been a request that was asked multiple times, and we weren't able to fully resolve it in the previous technology that we used. So, but it will be by default supported by Spring Cloud Gateway that I will be talking about a bit later. So, a bit later is right now. And the main change that's happening from our side, but that shouldn't have impact, we are merely raising it because it can have impact, is that we will be replacing the Netflix Zool-based API gateway with a new Spring Cloud Gateway. The main reason for this is that the Netflix Zool is not supported anymore, and as such, we want to limit risk coming from any potential vulnerabilities in the dependencies or in the code itself with well-supported and developed technology, which, given the fact that we are using Java for this area, Spring Cloud Gateway was the best choice. It's already part of version 2 and it will be there, but it's not going to be by default enabled on. By default, it will be enabled in the version 3 where the Netflix Zool won't be available anymore. The API mediation layer does support the way to provide extensions to the API mediation layer itself, not just via onboarding services, by actually changing the functionality. And if you are providing such extension, then you need to verify that you are not depending on the functionality that was provided by Zool. So this is a potential risk for extenders. The next topic was already happening with the transition from V1 to V2. And that was originally we removed the out endpoint from /API/v1/gateway route because we were changing throughout the version 1 to method or to a path that starts with the service ID instead of the service ID being at the end, as it seems to be more common among the service providers. And we got quite some pushback and misunderstanding that this is applicable to the authentication endpoints as well. As such, we retain them for the V2, but with V3, we intend to remove them as it's additional support, additional test, additional integration that we need to keep and that consumes our resources. And if you are using them still through the old route, you need to change this. The next thing is again around technical currency, and this is around Java 17 and Spring. Within the distributed world, but more or less anywhere, Spring version 5 and Spring Boot version 2 are going out of support at the end of the year. We will have some solution for us for V2, but we don't want to have to figure it out for another 4.5 years for V3. As such, we will be providing Spring Boot based enablers based on version 3. We will discontinue for version 3 the enablers using version 2 of Spring Boot, and we will be moving ourselves as the API mediation layer to using Spring Boot 3. So if you are using old enabler that's using Spring Boot 2, it's gonna be time to upgrade to Spring Boot 3 at some point. Like the one with Spring Boot 2 will work at least for a while. We don't have any plans for any breaking changes, but once there is any edit functionality, this functionality won't be added and backported to version 2. Then there are two areas that are not necessarily part of the API mediation layer as the technology, but that's part of the API mediation layer squad. And this is, first of them is Datasets API. It's a service that was originally used in version 0.x of Zowe to provide some of the functionality around datasets that were missing at the time in ZOSMF, but ZOSMF moved and developed, and now all the functionality that was part of this service is already in the ZOSMF. For version 2, the service was marked as deprecated and was disabled by default. And as such, in version 3, we intend to remove it fully and archive it and not support it anymore for version 3. It will be supported for the rest of the version 2 if you are using it in version 2. Same situation is happening with Jobs API. Again, its intention was mainly in the version 0.x of Zowe to provide a functionality that ZOSMF didn't provide at that time. The ZOSMF meanwhile moved and the functionality is provided there. And as such, we are going to archive it with version 3. We will be supporting it in version 2, same as with datasets. And we recommend you to move away if you do use it. But you don't use it accidentally. You had to enable it actually in version 2. Next thing, I don't think that's gonna directly touch the extenders, but Zowe will need to require Java 17 as it is a prerequisite for Spring Boot 3 and Spring 6, which we have to move on to for the support and minimizing risk of potential vulnerabilities. And as such, if you are going to depend running on the systems as Zowe, you can depend on Java 17 being there with the version 3 of Java, with version 3 of Zowe. Then this change is probably not going to impact you, but still I want to mention it as there may be some impact that we are just unaware of. And it's usually better to have more information than less in this area. We will be pre-recking specific requirements for ZOSMF. The main area for us is to make sure that the ZOSMF that we work with supports JWT tokens. It specifically means that the APAR PH12.13.4 needs to be applied. The reason why we are doing it is twofold. first, it limits the amount of testing that we need to do. And second, it cleans or limits the rules that we need to support in order to authentication to work across all the ZOSMF versions. Right now, I think that we have 4 or 5 different paths throughout the code just to accommodate different ZOSMF versions. So we will be pre-recking what ZOSMF version needs to be there in order to be able to clean this code and as such limit the potential risk. For both of these ZOSMF related changes, probably impact is none on extenders, but again, it may mean that the ZOSMF on the system will be different than the one you are depending on as of now. As for the conformance changes, there is just one, and it's around statically onboarded services. As of now, it's possible to copy the files to the Zowe directories directly and use them to onboard the files statically. So first, ideally, please onboard dynamically. It's anyway better way of treating the services, and it allows us to be more detailed about whether the services are up, what state and what health they are in. But second, also, we don't really want anyone to change the Zowe directories unless absolutely necessary, other than zoe.yaml file. And it's possible in a zoe.yaml file to specify additional directories or specific files to onboard statically. So please use this functionality, and it will be changed to required with v3 for statically onboarded, of course. If you are onboarding dynamically, you are done. No change there. As for the authentication, we are supporting 3 different key methods for the services to be onboarded. It's the JAL token, SAFIDT token, and pass tickets. We will be keeping support for pass tickets, but we will be recommending as a best practice that the JAL token or SAFIDT token is used. So if you are still using the pass tickets, we recommend to prepare a plan to move towards one of these. And the main reason is that supporting pass tickets requires a configuration changes on the side of the users, which make the installation more daunting. And also the integration and configuration is tougher. So it would be great if all the extenders at some point, not necessarily by v3, but at some point during the life of v3 moved towards using the token-based authentication or certificate-based authentication. If you don't know how to do it, we are providing ZAS client within the API mediation layer that you can integrate with, and that provides the functionality, that provides the methods that are behind calling the REST points that provides the API mediation layer. So v3 testing, we will be looking for help. We expect that the v3 server-side bundle will be available during November. We will be testing on quite some amount of different configuration and systems across all the vendors, and also as a Zowe, we are doing some testing. But it would be great if we are able to get more feedback from others that are using it as extending as extenders trying to use their service so that we are not breaking anything for you. As already mentioned, the key resource for v3 is gonna be zowe.org/vnext. We are gradually adding information about office hours, recordings, presentation materials, frequently asked questions, actual changes, conformance changes. So this is a one-stop page where you will find all the information about what's coming with v3 for different areas across Zowe. If you have any questions that were not answered during this call, then there are 3 primarily way of contacting us, either reaching out to us on the OMP Slack channel via either Zowe APR or Zowe user, or it's possible to reach privately to me via email. The email is part of this presentation. Or if you have even a question, you can open an issue in our repo, and we are doing a weekly triage where we will take a look and answer the questions as much as well as we can. And that's it for now. So any questions from the audience?
Hey, Jakob, yeah, I have one question. By the way, thanks very much for that presentation. It was really polished and as always. So for the pass tickets, so one of the things that was attractive about that was if you had a ZOS service that was using basic authentication, I know that people used to use the bypass method, and then that was removed, I think, from version 2. So a lot of those folks are switching to pass tickets because it means that they don't have to do the change to their application is minimal to onboard it, because the APML is able to generate a pass ticket and still use basic auth. Are you saying that people should? Yeah, I'd be interested to see what the journey is to go forwards without that much change made to the sort of incumbent backend service. If it just wants to take the user ID and because can you still use basic authentication, or do you have to start using?
You have to move if you. So first, I think that we will probably supporting pass tickets for quite a while. It's probably not gonna be removed. It's more that whenever it's pass ticket based, then you need to add configuration, and so it makes it more difficult for the users to onboard the services in their environment. Actually,
it does. Yes, it does. You're right. The pain is passed to the infrastructure team because they have to worry about the Apple ID. And I know. And I think you and I have been on some calls with customers. It's tricky to do.
Yeah.
But
the point here
is passed on to the team with that incumbent, sometimes a legacy application where they don't want to do that much development. Yeah.
Then let's figure out, and so I hope that during V3 we'll then figure out the way how to make it less painful for them, or maybe without any pain. But there are some changes that at some point I would say need to happen. Like we don't really have to rush it. It doesn't have to happen in the next 2 years, but within the next 6 years we probably need to move there.
Okay. Thanks for that update, Jakob. Yeah, and definitely I have some teams who are using the pass ticket protocol, and it would be interesting.
We do as well
to help them move forward. Yeah, but I also have teams that are using the token, which is far superior, but then that team has to be able to have an active development team and an active build pipeline to be able to modify their code to take advantage of that. And sometimes it's political rather than technical. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Jakob, this is Aaron. Can you talk a little bit about the transition of the gateways? Like, I'm just thinking about there's configuration that's provided, and right now they're kind of in separate areas in the config file. I'm just wondering, is that separation of how those configuration items are named going to remain, or is it going to kind of automatically, like if someone was on the old gateway and they're now picking up a V3 with the new Spring Cloud gateway, are there going to be configuration changes required, or would the old config still work?
So I would say that the ones that are directly provided by Zowe, these will work. But in Zowe docs, we also provide a link to a Netflix Zowe configuration parameters, and these won't be followed. So some of them won't even make sense anymore. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question properly. So in general, most of the configuration that's used, as we know, should just work as it is. So there won't be any change in Zowe.yaml. At least that's my current understanding. If you are using some advanced configuration that's provided by the Netflix Zowe, then there will be a different replacement, and we will know this and probably figure out some migration for the Zowe.yaml.
Okay, I guess the question, so I'm running a V2 build right now, and it's probably not even it's a snapshot build, but if I look at the Zowe.yaml, there's a gateway component, and then there's also a cloud gateway component. So I'm just wondering if with this move, anything that was under gateway, if that will just be picked up, or if they're going to remain separate.
I will have to verify. Like okay. I know that the both will remain for V2, because in V2 it's both will just remain. And
Right.
I'll need to verify whether for V3 we will just use both, which is an option that may be possible, or whether we will provide a tool and transfer how to move it properly.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions?
I just wanted to remind everyone that all of these questions with the answers will be posted at zoe.org vnext. So as we both mentioned, please continue to use that landing page, if you will, that page as your reference for all things V3. And of course, reach out to us if you're not finding the information that you need.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I had one more question. Sorry to do this.
Yeah, sure.
No,
maybe
thanks.
Maybe you covered it already, maybe I missed it. So for client certificates, if you have a client certificate as your kind of outward authentication protocol, and your service doesn't want to accept that client certificate, what are the, so remind me, so I think, yeah, how does that, because initially I think there wasn't, the client certificate would always be exchanged, but
Yes,
you couldn't float, yeah. So to talk to that for a few minutes, I wonder what the different,
okay.
Yeah.
So within the Spring Cloud Gateway, we figured out a way to pass the certificate through that's based on the RFC.
Okay.
So it's another option, but it's another option only if we receive the client certificate from the customer or from the northbound. So basically, if API mediation layer receives a certificate, then based on what the onboarded services requires, it either translates it to something else, e.g. JAL token or pass ticket or SafeIDT token, or it passes the certificate through so that the service can then verify whether it's okay for it.
Okay, that's perfect. So quite a common scenario that I'm finding more and more is people are using client certs for ZOSMF because it configures it and it works very, very well and it's very secure, and it reduces your attack surface for theft of credentials.
Yeah.
And that works very, very well. And then when they start to get into the Zowe ecosystem, like putting ZOSMF behind mediation layer or using some of the client technologies like CLI and VS Code, Zowe Explorers, or possibly the IntelliJ Explorer, which is maturing really nicely, we don't have such a good story there. So hopefully that will help towards it. So in the simple case where they want to have ZOSMF UI or ZOSMF REST APIs fronted by the mediation layer, you're saying that we will potentially be able to configure ZOSMF as a service that says if your client is using client certs from your client browser going through TLS, those can flow all the way through to ZOSMF's REST
I
API.
believe so. I will have to verify the exact details, but I believe that this is what was implemented.
That's where we're heading to. That's our North Star. That's brilliant to hear, because that would make changes, because the ZOSMF configuration is one that we provide, right? So we would have to provide a way for our default YAML.
There may be some ZOSMF change actually required because we have to pass them in a different way. Like there is RFC on how to do it, so we are following the standards, but we don't have the private key, so it's not the default. Like we are sending in a header. Basically, it's how you do it. If you are proxying anything and then you're sending the headers, the certificate through, you do it via header, custom.
But yeah, that's interesting.
RFC.
Yeah, both the two customers that I work with who have asked for that feature, and I'm happy to connect them. I'm actually visiting them next week, ironically. I've got some travel booked. They actually use the same certificate for ZOSMF as Zowe, right? They just create a Zowe keyring, but it's the same cert. It's the same SAF certificate. So I don't know if that would help. I don't know if that would mean that we did have the private key, because it's just a shared. But that's a cert. It's not. Yeah.
I think that we will have to take it offline and discuss.
Yeah, sorry,
Rose,
we're completely nerding out here. All right, thank you.
No, it's totally fine. It's a good question. It's just that I don't have the technical detail in my head right now to answer it precisely.
Thank you, Jakob. Cheers.
No worries. Good conversation.
Jakob, that just on ZOSMF,
Mhm.
I believe you stated earlier, here that there is a. So are we going to be saying, that now there is a minimum version of ZOSMF that is required to run Zoe v3? Is that basically
I
what we're saying here?
Yes, I would say so, yeah. We are
Okay.
still figuring out what exact version that is, but this is the intention, yes.
Okay, and I heard the reasons for doing that earlier, and that totally makes sense. But I just wanted to make sure that was what we're doing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question. Any other question?
Jakob, on the possible conformance change, I think it was a conformance change related to pass tickets.
Here, yes.
Are we saying that we're going to add an entry and indicate that it's a best practice to use something other than pass tickets?
We already have required one of these three methods, so it's going to be more like just a text change.
Okay. And should we indicate that the plan for future Zoes would be to drop pass tickets at this point, or?
I'd rather not right now. I think
Okay.
that throughout V3 we will be discussing how exactly to do this, and I think that around V4 or V5 we will be able to actually do it. So I know that this is going to take a while.
Okay. And perhaps research technical
How
ways to assist with services that need to make this change. Okay. All right, that's fair.
Because right now it would be quite tricky, and we know of, I don't know, maybe 20 services that are using pass tickets. So it's going to be a lot of effort, and we need to figure out how to do this in a painless way.
Okay. I wonder, I know Joe commented on this, that this can be tricky as well for the consumers. I wonder if we could consider a conformance criteria that advises the conformance service to make sure that they have the documentation in place to clearly articulate how to onboard this service.
That's a good point. It would be great if we provide a template documentation that any service can use, so that it's at least as easy as possible for the customers to do this setup. Maybe we can even integrate it somehow in the ZWE tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing that can help. So Rose and Jakob, with languages like Java, for example, when they want to start removing APIs on a sort of gradient that customers can be comfortable with, is you can start to deprecate things. And then I don't know if we do that already, Jakob, but you can have a way to say log deprecated messages, because they're going to get more chatty and there might be some performance implication. So you could view anyone going through the gateway, and then if this deprecation log on tag was true, you could just simply write some deprecation methods, and it would just give a little bit more early warning to
I believe that's what we will probably figure out throughout the V3, and for V4 it's going to be deprecated, and then in V5 it's going to be removed. But this is for your lifeline, so I'm kind of guessing something.
Yeah, because didn't we do that a while back? So there was a node release that we knew we wanted to give people time to prepare, and there were some deprecation methods, and then it went hard stop, and that gives people a little bit of heads up. Yeah,
we do. If we provide and use this deprecated for many things, like we've been raising this for the jobs and datasets APIs, we've been having specific APIs within the API mediation layer that were deprecated. So we use this mechanism. It's just that we will have to figure out first how to do it for conformance. We don't have the deprecated there yet. And second, what exactly do we want to log and where, which is something we will do throughout the V3.
And Rose's question reminded me. So I know that bypass was removed from V2 conformance, but I think it was still supported. So it is. Is it still going to be supported in version 3? But
yes, it will. We don't intend to remove this support. It's just that if you use any authentication, then you have to use the authentication method. So, for example, if you will have a fully public service that goes through the API mediation layer, then you can use bypass and still follow the criteria.
But you wouldn't get a conformance badge.
You would. You would? What it requires you is if you use authentication, then you have to use one of these supported authentication
Oh,
methods. If
okay.
you don't use authentication, you don't have to use bypass.
Okay. Thank you.
The point is that SSO works. So if you use bypass but actually required authentication, then the SSO wouldn't work. If it's fully public, then the SSO still works.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the question. Any
Sorry, I didn't want to
go.
hop on it, but I thought the SSO, I thought it was mandatory. I thought if you were using bypass, you wouldn't get a V2 conformance badge. I thought it was dropped as a criteria.
It was dropped as a way for authentication. So originally we supported it even if you needed authentication if you used bypass. That changed.
But isn't SSO mandatory for V2 conformance?
It is. And that's why I'm talking about public services only. Like if you have no endpoint that requires authentication, then you can claim whatever you want because you are never going to go through rows to actually use the token.
Okay.
So from the SSO point of view, from the user's point of view, it's not gonna change. Like it will work.
Because they're accessing a completely unauthenticated service.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So like the only way where you can use bypass and be conformant is if the service provides only public endpoints without any authentication.
Only public unauthenticated endpoints. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
If this is the case, then the conformance doesn't require you. It just requires you if you authenticate to do it properly.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions? APML or V3 related?
I guess, Jakob, because it's being recorded and some people may just first now be thinking about V3, could you say a little bit more about dates? I think you mentioned November as I don't know if you call it a tech preview or beta, what words to use with what you're planning, and then thoughts for rollout next year. I know we're trying to pull the dates in for V3 compared to what we did with V2. Yes, go ahead.
So first, for V3 date, the TSC already agreed upon date, and the specific date that we intend to release and go GA and LTS is 28th March. So this will become part of the VNext and announced, but it's already agreed upon and it's official and public. As for the preview, we intend to have a Paxis SMPE builds that anyone, including us, can start testing with during November. So technically speaking, it's gonna be in development phase. So we will have the V3 under development phase with bundles being available for use during November. Then we will be verifying, testing, improving, adding minor changes up until the time before we agree that it's good enough. And then the GA date is 28th March, so it would be sometime before this date, which will be also the time where by which we will be working on the documentation, providing the tools to upgrade, and so on. In general, sure, ask Bruce.
Oh, I was just and we're talking both the ZOS components as well as the client side components when we give this date.
Yeah, it applies for everything. I know that for the tech preview, I believe the Explorers already published their V3, and I think that CLI as well in a preview. So, but there will be office hours focused on extenders for these components or these projects, and they know the exact details.
Right.
I don't have them in my head.
Yep, understood. I just wanted to be sure that people listening to this recording got the bigger picture of what we're planning. Thanks.
Sure, thanks for that.
Jakob, I might also add that we'll plan to open up the V3 conformance program early for anyone who wants to pre-apply and be V3 conformant day one. And we'll probably look to do that mid to end of February.
And if you are looking to apply for conformance with a service that's onboarding to API mediation layer that's already conformant in V2, then as of now, we don't see any required changes that you need to do in order to apply for V3. So it should be easy.
Okay. Just a couple of new best practices, perhaps.
Yeah, basically. But
okay.
They don't prevent you to get the badge again.
Correct. Awesome. Maybe we need to add a slide with that timeline info.
Yeah, that's probably a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions? Then back to you, Rose, it seems.
All righty. Well, thank you all for joining. As I mentioned, this is the first of 5 planned presentations related to V3 and Zowe extenders. Next week, same time, same link, we will be covering the Zowe command line interface, Zowe CLI. So please consider joining us again next week at this time, and look for the details in the recordings at zowe.org vnext. Thank you so much, Jakob. Great job. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.